humans. Welcome back to the Hope for Humans podcast. Today's conversation goes a little something like this. There's a pop culture phrase that I've really had disdain for. And the phrase is, your truth.
Oh, okay.
And for the listening audience, cheers or jeers me, there's a reason behind that. It might surprise you.
Please explain yourself.
I will. Okay. Well, I can promise you it's a very interesting conversation. You'll want to hear the rest of it. So let's get started.
This is a production of Pioneer Dream, celebrating 30 years of moving stories for corporate, nonprofit, and entertainment partners. Please help us keep the conversation going by rating, liking, and subscribing to this podcast. Thank you. Also, make sure to check out our other podcast, Mixed Up Mystics, featuring refreshingly honest conversations about Christianity, and Got a Minute mini podcast, presenting funny stories and independent music, all in about 15 minutes. Now, here's Jay and Anjanette Webster.
Thank you, Evangeline. And humans, what is up? Welcome back to the podcast. Hello, Anjanette.
Hey, what's going on?
I have had a full morning already. I did my...
Really? I bet my morning was fuller than your morning.
I had my virtual coffee this morning with my friend Sean Thomas. Shout out to Sean Thomas.
What up, Sean?
And that was fantastic. We talked about a lot of things.
That's cool.
He came up with, I'm not going to remember it perfectly. We were talking about a capital...
Okay.
An existence that was kind of capital-centric, where you're built on capitalism and making money and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Versus this phrase he had, which I think was more or less shine-centric. You live a shine-based life.
Yeah.
That's what he said.
And some people call that following your heart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your E.T. heart life.
Yeah, I like it.
So
that's cool.
a shine-based life versus a capital-based life.
When
And
your
that was
main
great.
motivation isn't dinero, as they say in Spanish.
Right. And then I went from a virtual coffee to a physical coffee.
Are you trying to tell me right now that you had a double header of coffees?
Jazzed. And then as happens when I'm doing coffee at our Outpost coffee shop, shout out Outpost.
Yay.
I know that when I'm there, I go to work there as a little different environment once or twice a week. And I know when I'm there, I'm going to see people, which is kind of the reason I go.
But you usually go to write, right?
I'm going to write. Okay. So I have a whole thing that I've worked out with your brother, which is when you're working and you have headphones on.
Yeah.
I was explaining this to our neighbor Blair the other day.
Right.
That the whole thing is when you see someone, there's a code.
Yeah.
That says how much you're available to talk or interact with somebody.
Yeah.
And so the first thing is if you look up and you wave, but you leave the headphones in, this says I'm into something right now. I'm sorry I can't stop.
I do see that you're here.
But I affirm and acknowledge your presence.
Right. That's nice. Right.
The next thing is when you see someone, if you take a single headphone out, it says, hey, I see you. I like you. I've got about a minute here to have a little simple exchange.
Yeah.
That's that. And then the other thing is
chat.
When you take both headphones out and you kind of, you kind of lower the lid of your laptop that says, okay, we're going to talk for a few minutes.
That says, I'm avoiding work right now.
We're having a good time.
Come on over.
Yeah. And so,
you know what's so funny?
So today,
when we're in a big city, like when we're working in cities, you don't have to do any of that. No one ever. If you have headphones in, you're dead to anyone. You. But it's in
outside to say, is anybody sitting here?
Yes, in our lovely city.
Yeah. And so today, our friend Steve Hine came in, and he was
shout out to Steve Hine.
He was on his way to something else, and then he said, "Hey, do you have a minute? Can I sit down for a second?"
Yeah.
And I thought, well, that's a nice way to put that. And I did have a minute, so we did, and we had a huge conversation, not long, but just it was a great exchange.
He's a great guy to talk to.
Yeah, a lot of great stuff, and we covered a lot of ground quickly, and I felt better for it. But that's not why you called.
No, why did they call?
Hey, speaking of which, we just had on Friday night a really fantastic Dreamers Live event. It was outside. It was our Una de Mayo event.
Yes, it was really fun.
Oh my gosh,
beautiful.
Sangria, and shout out to Harry and Mary Deeth who hosted us in their
historic
movie-ready home. It's such a cool house. It
in
looks
the
like
courtyard.
It looks like it should be part of a movie. And
not only did they host, Mary made her homemade recipe guacamole for everyone. And it was TDF, as they say. That's to die for, guys.
And then at some point, Harry even said, hey, we're outside here in the courtyard and everything, but if you would like to come in and see the house. And I was like, what are you doing, Harry? You don't invite people in. The whole point of the outside event is to keep people outside.
No, they wanted people to come see the house.
And then he invited humans into the house to tour and look at oh my gosh.
Well, Mary told me behind the scenes he'd had quite a honey-do list before the party, so he was really proud of all of his work.
Which we confided in that we do that a lot. We often set events up to force ourselves to get things done.
That's what Mary said too. They were like, okay, we're going to get all this done by dreamers. Sometimes you need a deadline.
Yeah, he bought some patio chairs, some patio furniture to finish things out.
Yeah, it was looking great.
But anyway, even without all of that, it was an amazing night. We had so many new people, new faces, people who had been, reading about Dreamers and thinking about coming to Dreamers for years. And then this was the night they came. And the weather ended up being perfect. It was like 65 and sunny, and the sun was just going down. And it was just gorgeous. And like we say, sometimes you get to an event like Dreamers and the people arrive with this kind of sense of expectation. So they're there because they want to be together. They're there for the sense of community, and they're there because they want to have a good time. And it's hard to screw that up. And we did. So no,
it was great. And one more highlight before we move on was our friend Cheryl and her partner, Tori. Tori, am I saying that right? Yeah, Tori. Yeah. Tori and Cheryl moved here from Arizona, and they got to make it, and it was so cool.
So we went to high school, we went to middle school and high school with Cheryl. Had a locker next to her my whole locker career.
Oh, yeah. His last name's Smith, and then Webster, SW.
Yeah, and so she just moved back, and we're so excited. And it's a little culture shock coming from, larger season stuff back.
But they did it on purpose. They moved here on purpose, so they're going to love it.
And so we had a great time seeing their faces, and our friend Dana McCoy made it for the first time. We met so many new people, and it was just a great night and a lot of pleasant stuff. And so
check that one off the list.
Yeah, so great. If our next one will be on May 19th, June 19th.
You were close. Location
to be announced, and so mark your calendars for that. That'll be a Friday night, and it'll be a lot of fun. And that will be our last one before the summer break. So if you've been thinking, I really need to get the Dreamers, no better time than the present.
June 19th,
June 19th. Yeah. No better time than June 19th.
I love it.
I was working on this column today, and I've been thinking about for a while. And we do an awful lot of work with kind of large companies on our video side of stuff, and so for us, we get around a lot of people who do corporate speak, and it's all these phrases and terms, and then they kind of, all those terms bleed into pop culture. And sometimes I hate some of that language because it ends up being euphemisms for some things that are really big, and it kind of glosses over the human element of the conversation sometimes.
Becomes sort of like jargon,
And then sometimes there are phrases you just don't like, and then sometimes you learn to dislike a phrase because it just gets overused. Phrases like
unpacked.
Let's unpack that. No, let's unpack that.
I'm not going
or
to.
Your journey.
Yeah. One of mine is let's circle back to.
Oh my gosh.
And there's nothing wong with it. It's just that's like a great song on the radio that gets played too often. You're like, I hate that song now.
So other phrases that you get misused, like the whole 6-7 and everything else. But it's just
yesterday was Cinco de Mayo, real quick, and our daughter Evangeline looked at me and she said, today is May 6th that we're recording this, and she goes, "Se siete." That was pretty funny.
Yeah, pretty perfect.
Right.
So there's a phrase that I have. There's a pop cultural phrase that I've really had disdain for a long time.
Is that what we're talking about today?
Yeah.
Your disdain for this particular cultural phrase?
And the phrase is your truth.
Oh, okay.
And before the listening audience cheers or jeers me.
Cheers or jeers.
There's a reason behind that. It might surprise you.
Please explain yourself.
I will.
Mr. Panda.
So, so it starts from, it was kind of a cousin to this whole thing about your journey and all that kind of stuff and the personal part of that stuff. And I get a lot of that ramification. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it feels a little too millennial for me in the process.
As in millennials, the generation below us?
In the sense that it kind of seems a little self-absorbed, a little, it's the people that get on the socials and act like they've discovered walking outside for the first time.
Okay.
I went outside for a walk today.
It's called exercise.
We've all been walking for a long time.
Yeah, I gotcha.
So that part of it is a thing. But I think part of it was I felt like, I don't know, this thing about truth, I didn't feel like in a sense it could be objective. I mean, truth is a truth. And so to make it an objective thing, I thought, I don't know. I don't really know if that can be done. So the way this phrase works is it kind of works on a couple different levels. There's this therapy version of your truth. Okay. And that version is related to your experience. So we both have family members who both immediate and distant family members who have had challenges in life, and sometimes they try and tie that back to something that happened in their childhood even. Okay. And so in therapy, you use the word or this phrase, your truth, to represent what you experienced, which we all know and which therapists know may or may not be reality or what actually happened, but it was how you experienced it.
It's your perspective
and it's what
happened.
Yeah, it's what you felt that moment. And so like I did a collection of stories from my childhood. And at the beginning of it, I said, these are the stories this is truth as I remember it. I'm not claiming that it's what really happened, but this is what I remember happening.
But you know that. You know that how memory works.
And we see that because our daughter is brilliant and she's really, has a great memory, but she will recall things from 4, 5, 6 years old. And because you and I were there, we know adults. That's not how, what happened or when it happened.
But in her mind, that's her truth.
But she has she's rehearsed that memory so many times that has become her truth.
Yeah.
And in our family members, especially for those who happen to be younger than us, they'll recite something. And a lot of times it even goes into a claimed infraction, like you did this or you said that, and this is how that played out, and you think I was there and that didn't happen. That's not how we did that. Yeah. And so your truth, in a therapy standpoint, if you come at somebody and say that's probably not what really happened, well, you throw everything off the rails. So you have to give a person an opportunity to say how they saw something, what that was like for them, what they experienced, what they were feeling.
Yeah.
And then you can start to address the other things around it. So you have to give someone time to quote unquote say their truth.
Yeah.
What happened for them in that moment. And then you get a chance to address some other stuff in the process.
Sure.
And I think that's important. All of us have had, in the best possible way, our own experiences. So, you have a moment like graduation or a wedding that is supposed to be this way, and yet you have a different experience now, like, oh, this is really difficult. It should be a bright moment, but there's all this other baggage to it too.
Yeah.
So that's one explanation of it. Another one is kind of like when it's the social media pop culture version of your truth, which is kind of like be authentic to yourself. Whatever is true for you, whoever you want to be, whatever you want to accomplish, what rules you want to abide by. And that's not bad. It's just that's the social media pop culture version of it.
Okay.
And then there's the other version of it, which kind of runs into...
Are you telling me there's 3 versions
I'm saying there's probably a couple of them.
Is that your truth or someone else's?
That's what I read.
Right.
So the other version of this phrase, your truth, kind of gets into the objective part of it. So that might be something where you have like spirituality or faith. And in that way, there's a truth that is actually objective, that, as your dad would say, is bigger than the way we feel. And that in some ways can be really powerful because you discover a truth that is transformative, that offers you change. So the idea of forgiveness, the idea of certain spiritual truths and realities, that can help in a lot of ways, and it has. So you can come at that phrase a lot of different ways. But here's kind of what hit me in this process today.
Okay.
I was thinking about people and their use of the phrase your truth or my truth. Mm-hmm. And where I think I had been critical of that phrase for a long time for all the reasons we just talked about.
Apparently you have spent some time thinking about it. Is this what you do when you mow the lawn?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I also want to say, at this point in my life, I spend most of my life trying to not be the angry old man. So,
right. It's easy. Well, it just settles in on you. You can start.
Yeah. So I started thinking about, this thing about your truth and stuff. And I started thinking about, when I was growing up, believe it or not, I was not gay. And
well, yes, because we are married.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so that's one of the reasons. And so I wasn't gay. There weren't gay people in my family that I knew of at the time or anything like that. I wasn't connected to a lot of gay people. So I didn't have a significant understanding of homosexuality or the homosexual culture or community or any of that.
Simply weren't around it.
Wasn't connected to it. Yeah. So I was not strongly associated with that or identifying with that group at all.
Right.
I probably, in my mind, didn't understand that group and probably didn't afford them, a lot of presence or opportunity.
Sure.
It wasn't until we got older and we got out more and we were working long-term in other cities and communities, and we had friends that we would later find out were gay.
Yeah.
And
guess what? It turns out they were just as awesome as anyone else.
They were amazing, generous, loving, kind, creative, brilliant people.
Yeah.
And so now I did have context for homosexuality. I did have context for the gay community. I did have this thing.
Mm-hmm. And it was based on your personal interaction and friendship with people.
So whereas as a young person, my truth was, I don't know homosexuals.
Yeah.
I don't identify that way.
I don't
have
get
a place for them, really.
Yeah.
And so that was not my truth. Now, that's part of my truth.
Yeah.
Knowing those people, knowing that community, knowing their civil rights, knowing the whole thing on all that stuff, that is now part of my truth.
Your truth has expanded.
So what's interesting about that is, even though it wasn't my truth before, it was somebody's truth. And we have this tendency when it's not, quote unquote, our truth, to nullify it for somebody else.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right.
So because it's not my truth or my orientation or my context, it's probably not true. It's probably not real. We've done that, with different denominations. If somebody believes different than you are, well, they're probably strange.
Sure.
We don't afford them opportunities sometimes. We don't give them the space to do things their way and how they think it should be done.
We do that with different races.
Yeah, I think
different
about that.
Cultures.
I think about that like, I grew up Catholic, you grew up Baptist, and within those two traditions, there's a lot of variance.
Yeah.
Even how you do baptism, which should be a unifying thing, but with the Catholics, we baptize babies.
Yeah.
We sprinkled and all that kind of stuff. With Baptist, it was a conscious decision as a semi-adult within the church, and you dunked people and you did the whole. And it was we had the crucifix, which had Jesus on the cross.
We took Jesus off.
You took Jesus off the cross. All that kind of stuff, and because between the two groups, there wasn't a lot of context between them.
Yeah, we didn't know.
You could say, "Well, I'm not going to do that. I don't want to cross with a person on it. I don't want to do that. That's not putting.
That's not my truth."
So that's not my truth, and we can't. And we didn't afford people the same respect to do what was their truth.
Yeah.
And I think there are like 1,000. Like I think about things like this is a hot topic, but the trans people.
Okay.
People who are trans. We don't have a child who's, a trans child.
Yes.
We are not personally in that community very much.
But we know people who have had.
But we have found our way into that.
Yeah.
And so what I can say is if even though that's not your context or your family's context, we can identify with someone who kind of feels like an alien in their own body, who feels uncomfortable in their own body.
Yeah.
I think about someone, who's struggling with cancer, who might have a tumor. And so you're awaiting an opportunity to have either an operation or start radiation. But in the meanwhile, this thing is in you that you want to get out. And there's an anxiety about that thing being in you. And, well, to me, there's a certain part of that overlap in the idea of being trans. And so, yes,
the idea that you would be feel foreign in your own body, and feel like you identify a different way,
right?
Yeah, and so even though that's something that you can't fully understand unless you've been there,
right.
You can understand why people would choose that option.
Yeah,
right?
Well, and also that and that's not saying that it's not a complicated issue. It is a complicated, and if it's your child going through it, it's a complicated issue. So it's just the blanket no.
Yeah.
It's the blanket,
Yeah.
That's the thing that I think gets into a place because it's not, quote unquote, your truth. Doesn't mean it's not someone else's truth, and they don't deserve the respect of a conversation or consideration in that process.
Well, so let me ask you this. Yeah, I get what you're saying, and this is it's an important thing to talk about.
Yeah.
Do you have to agree with someone's truth in order to honor their truth?
I don't think so.
Right.
I think respect is respect.
Right.
Freedom is freedom. I'm not Jewish.
Right.
I respect the Jewish faith,
Mm-hmm.
and I respect someone's opportunity to celebrate and practice that faith.
Yeah.
Go do it.
Yeah.
I'm not personally redneck. I have a lot of friends who are rednecks.
You are not at all redneck.
But I love them, and I don't want them to look like me, and I don't want them to be like me.
Yeah.
And I don't, even though I don't personally own a truck and I don't personally wear boots, I also know how much I love those people and how great they are. And they are the same with me. They don't want to be me.
Right.
They don't want to do what I do
No,
for a living.
they think you're artsy fartsy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
they love you.
But they respect me.
Yeah.
I think the same thing is true in politics.
Mm-hmm.
And we are starting to understand more and more the difference between the caricature that we form of other people on the other side and who they really are.
Yeah.
And trying to understand why they feel what they feel.
Yeah.
I think is a significant. What is it that this group fears?
Yeah.
What
That's
is
what
it
I was
this
going to
group
say.
is ahead of?
I mean, it's fear-based and really, and that's when most often when we're angry, it's covering up fear that we have. And I think it's interesting. Yeah. I think maybe, is it like people who don't understand a different culture? Let's look at racism.
Oh, that's a great thing. Yeah.
And so they don't really get, well, I don't know why they,
Right.
Always do that or why they celebrate that way. I think for people who aren't open to other ideas and other people's, maybe they fear that those practices are like contagious.
I mean,
that's what's interesting.
At some level,
yeah, you think, oh, well, okay, if I begin to try to understand why they might celebrate that way or dress that way,
right.
Am I going to become like that? I mean, do you think
this
that
is a total teardown of what?
Yeah. So
exactly.
It's like this sort of protective thing that we try to do to preserve what we know that's familiar.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, we have so many examples of that. I think that the cultural part of that is really, it's so much about is your zip code. If you're in a different place, would you feel different about this? Would you see this different?
Yeah.
If you had been born in India, would you see Christianity different than you do today?
Yeah, it's interesting.
If you were, born in Africa, would you see it differently than you do today?
Well, I think we've talked about this before. I was fortunate to spend a lot of my formative years in New Mexico before we moved to Oklahoma.
Right.
And it's pretty interesting. I was actually talking with a class about, I think it was Dreamers Club on one of our Dreamers Club podcasts. And so this was back in the early 80s, we'll say, to date ourselves. But I was one of the only white kids at one of the elementary schools that we attended in Santa Fe. Yeah, Pinon Elementary. There you go. Yeah. And so I would say, and this is based on my childhood memory, I could verify with my parents that maybe it was 80% Hispanic and maybe 20% other. And so I was a minority, which didn't seem to bother me at all. In fact, I fell in love with the Spanish language. I remember the librarian was very entertained because here's this little white girl who's 7 and would go to the library and ask if I could check out Spanish books so that I could start trying to learn them. I've always loved Hispanic culture ever since then. But my point is, I did experience what it was like to be a minority. And there were times where I maybe didn't understand what was going on around me, but instead of fearing that, I saw that as an adventure to learn something new.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And
so I think if we can let that fear sometimes go and be open, man, life is so much more of an adventure.
It really is.
But those cultures are beautiful. And their truth, we can respect it and sometimes even enjoy it.
Oh, man.
So it's an important thing.
I think about there's a couple of other versions of this that I think I can draw a line to in our lives, but one of them was kids with developmental disabilities, and so I didn't have any connection to that. You didn't have any connection to that, really. It wasn't in our lives. And
actually, we had a very, very special Down syndrome friend of our family named Jenny, who was so precious. And we were friends with her entire family. And so I had an experience with that really early, just the preciousness of who she was. But it had been a while.
But for me, I didn't have that until we were hired to do a series of documentary pieces for Special Olympics.
Yeah.
And that community was so gracious and so loving, and they welcomed us in, and we fell in love with the athletes and the families.
We're still friends with some of them.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And it changed us.
Yeah.
And it changed our truth. It changed our understanding, our perspective. And it was so important. And to connect some dots, it also changed. It was part of the thing that was integral in changing my awareness of the homosexual community, because here we were doing Special Olympics, and we had this one kid who's probably 14, 15 is one of the athletes, and absolutely gay, and absolutely unaware of I need to make a choice to be gay or not be gay or any of those kind of things.
Absolutely. That was not fed to him. That was the way that he was.
It's absolutely who that person was. In the same way that they were white, in the same way that they were developmentally challenged, and all that stuff. And so it created an awareness of all the, healthcare needs and all the challenges,
the sacrifices that their families were making.
And they were amazing
families. And so any of those instances that you talk about, and we've been fortunate to have a life that kind of forced us out with other people.
Yes.
I mean, we wanted that kind of life. But when you are in contact with real, actual people, it's one thing to say, I don't understand people that are developmentally disabled. That is hard to say.
Yes, right.
Or I don't understand people that are Hispanic, or I don't understand people that are gay. It's one thing to say that. But when you are out with people and your heart and mind is open to getting to know who they are, and you see the beauty in them, you become open because they are in many ways just like us. But for, I think, a good portion of the population, particularly in areas like Oklahoma that can be a bit isolated, we're right in the middle of the country, not everyone. But if you're too afraid to ever open your circle to anyone beyond what you're comfortable with, you will never experience that.
Yes.
So it's very easy to say, well, I don't get them. I don't understand that group. Or why do they dress that way? Well, maybe we felt that way when we were younger until we met Fred. Or until we became friends with Jennifer's family.
Well, we absolutely saw this, in the pandemic, I think. There was a really clear picture of it. So
how so?
I felt like your response to the pandemic and your response to the closure of kind of shutting down of the world, how you viewed that was really directly connected to your connection to the pandemic and on a firsthand basis.
Yeah, so we were talking about that yesterday.
For example, like if you happen to be in the medical field and you are watching thousands upon thousands of people die, the idea of not social distancing or the idea of opening America too soon was terrifying because you were firsthand seeing people die in that really difficult way. And so if you were connected in that way, or if you lost family in that way or something like that, that was one perspective.
Yes.
The other perspective was if you happen to have a business that you've tried to build over 20 years or 30 years with employees, or even if you were the only employees, and you were considering losing that business because you weren't generating income and you were losing money. And so this thing that you had built was threatened, then you had a whole other perspective. You had a whole other thing. So it was really, and both were passionate about it, both really didn't fully understand because of the fear and the immediacy of these things. They didn't, we really clashed in that.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we also attributed, malice in the process. So this side was evil and this side was evil and on and on. And that was really unfair. And also, the fact that we were doing all this and making decisions on this in real time, in terms of how we responded to this as a society, real time against a monster that was unknown in the moment. You couldn't fully see in the moment.
It was, we were all pushed into a position of having to respond to something immediately without being able to find out what was truth or even having time to process the information. Yeah. So, COVID was a huge...
But your proximity to that crisis really set you, for most people, where they were.
So here in Oklahoma, especially in our smaller city where we lived, there were a lot of people who, did not want to do what was asked of the government. social distancing, masking, all those. They felt like, oh, that's just for those big cities. That's not happening here. And that isn't true. It was happening here.
We lost a lot of people.
In smaller numbers. And we had friends who sadly died.
Yeah.
But the other side of that perspective is we had a friend who lived in New York City, actually lives in a small island outside of the city.
Yeah.
And so many people were dying in those metropolitan areas that there was actually a truck to refrigerate the bodies to take them to the main island to be buried. I mean, that is unbelievable.
Yes.
So that's a different perspective.
Yeah.
A lot of people here were pissed that they couldn't go to Walmart without wearing a mask.
Right.
And so that was their only perspective is, this is keeping me down, man. The government's keeping me down.
Yeah.
And never mind, in other places, people were literally fighting for their lives.
Yeah.
And that's, that's about as serious as it can get in what we're talking about. But if we had not been open to believe those other perspectives, we wouldn't have taken the measures that we were willing to take in hopes of protecting people, vice versa. So anyway, it's fear at the root of it.
Yeah. And so it is. And I think that's what's important about it is about perspective. It is about our proximity to an issue. And it is about, I think at some level, it's not saying that anything goes. It's not saying that we should just, let mayhem ride and all that kind of stuff, or that there's not some objective truth. And I believe there is. Gravity is an objective truth, and there are some things that I think, that being an objective truth helps us.
Yes.
There's also a thing about, I think, acknowledging that just because it's not your truth doesn't mean we can dismiss it.
Yeah.
Just because it's not your truth doesn't mean it's not real.
Yeah.
Or that it's not real for that person. Just because it's not your faith, just because it's not your doctrine, just because it's not your nationality, just because it's not your family tradition, just because it's not your
political party,
physical element or your political party or your, any of those kind of things does not mean it's not true. ADHD, just because your kid doesn't have it doesn't mean that it's not real for somebody else. Or just because, like we joke about it, if it didn't happen in our childhood, it's not real. Well, that's the thing. We joke about that. No one put on sunscreen when we were kids. No one put on, no one had ADHD when we were kids. No one did this. No one did that.
Yeah.
Well, that wasn't reality. We just didn't know what it was at the time.
Growing up, did any of the adults around you ever use a version of the phrase like, you don't know a man until you've walked a mile in his shoes? Right. And those are, it's kind of an old adage, but
that's a great reminder.
Man, it's true. It's sort of like, and again, it can come back to not necessarily agreeing or even endorsing someone else's way of life.
Yes.
But you can't say to someone, well, you can, you're not going to have very many friends, but you can't say to somebody, that's not your story.
Yes.
You didn't experience that.
Right.
You don't know what you felt like there, We
had a conversation on an episode a long time ago now. But it was essentially about, how anger had become, the fast food of emotions in America. And it's become the thing. It's the immediate response, and it's an easy response. You don't have to work to get anger up. You can get angry quickly. I don't have to work to make myself mad.
Right.
I don't have to work to judge someone. I don't have to work to have unforgiveness. I just do that naturally.
Yeah, exactly.
The virtue, as we call it, is to override that, to go slow into that.
Yeah.
And so part of that, and what has been a missing ingredient for us as America lately, and probably for other countries too, is the concept of empathy. And empathy is not saying, yes, I agree with you. Empathy is not adopting someone else's point of view. Empathy is understanding why someone feels the way they feel, why they believe what they believe, from an understanding of a non-judgmental course.
Yeah, and giving them the grace to do that.
Yeah, giving them the freedom to say, that's why. And so for there are a lot of people that we probably don't agree with politically, but we understand and we're sensitive to the fact of why they believe that, what they see in that, what they're hoping to combat with this anger. Yeah,
there's a phrase that I use sometimes in talking with people when I don't necessarily wouldn't agree with what they're saying. And I would say, I can see how you could get there.
Yeah.
And that is it. That's all it is. It's putting yourself in the other person's shoes and saying, okay, given where they grew up and these experiences that happened to them, I could see how they would be afraid of these people.
Right.
I mean, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
you can start to see how they could get there. It doesn't mean I agree with your racist views.
Well, here's a great example of this, I think. And one of your favorite movies is Saving Private Ryan.
Oh my God, no. I couldn't even. I walked out of it.
Yeah, because
I can't handle. I cannot handle this. It's so
because
sad.
You hate our country, and
no,
I know. Yeah.
I just have a memory that holds on to things.
Yes.
And the one scene that I saw before I walked out of the movie quietly, I still can tell you in vivid detail.
Traumatic.
Yeah. It's just too sad.
It was too painful. Was the reality of it. But that movie helped me so much because coming up.
And you told me about it later, so that's good.
Yeah, coming up as kids in the 70s and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The 60s were still present, and we I think really still identified at some level with the 60s and the idea of creating a new world, and a world that celebrated peace, and a world that kind of threw off the shackles.
Anti-establishment.
Well, and threw off the shackles of this expectations and the heavy-handedness sometimes of culture and all that kind of stuff. And so, we were always more closely connected to that, I think, ideologically as a kids from the 70s.
Yeah.
And then you go to see that movie and you witness what that generation went through.
Gosh.
And what they endured and what they sacrificed and how painful that was. And you come home and just 10 short years later, 12 or 15 years later, you have another generation that's saying, no, thank you. I don't want that, man. Exactly. I don't want any of that.
Yeah.
And so what would have felt like a slap in the face, would have felt like pain for what you sacrificed and what your family sacrificed and the people you lost in that. I can see where that conflict happens now. Well, but it's understanding both perspectives.
Exactly.
It's understanding
the truths.
why.
You have the two truths there.
Yeah.
You have the truths of the generation that suffered
and both of them had legitimate points. Both of them had legitimate goals. Both of them, and it was a point of conflict, but understanding some of that, I think, I can see it now. Now, it's a lot easier to do that.
When
30 years back.
It is. Yeah. And when you're younger, and I think I was especially, I would have thought of myself as sort of a black and white person. I could say, this is right, this is wrong.
Yeah.
And that's just how it is. And I do believe that there is some objective truth in the world.
I do too.
But my point being that the more you see of life, the older you get, if you allow yourself to know people and to know their stories, there's a whole lot of gray out there, guys.
Yeah.
I mean, it is not as easy as yes and no all the time. It's rarely that easy.
And I would never slam any group at all, this conversation about, rural versus urban and all that. And there's so many great things about both of those sections of our country. But there is an interesting thing in the way that that rural community can, often is a little bit more black and white and a little bit more conservative.
They're often isolated. They're out.
Well, and then there's this other part of it where when we're all put in together, when we're all living together, side by side, and you are kind of forced to recognize and see people and do all that kind of stuff, and so there is a whole lot more of awareness or acceptance of the other people because now we're seeing you.
Yeah,
you're
not
my
someone.
Neighbors. I'm not reading about you over here. I'm not looking at a two-dimensional caricature of you over there. I'm living beside you, and I know you're my neighbor.
Exactly.
And I think that does affect the way we see things.
Yeah.
And
I think art can play a helpful role. Like, for example, Saving Private Ryan. I mean, that's a beautiful piece of art, an important piece. And that changed your story, your willingness to look at the other side story. And so that's why it's great to read. It's great to see things. It's great to investigate and do research. And that's when I think of open-minded and open-hearted people. Like, I want to understand what it was like to be, Jewish in a certain time period. I want to know those things because that changes your mind. Nothing changes it like getting to know people, but sometimes we don't always have the opportunity. I don't have the chance to meet people from China very often, but, that changes your world. And so I guess that's what I was going to ask you is for those of us that are challenged sometimes to be open to other people's truth, what would you say to encourage people? If they, I'm sure some people listening are like, this is tough for me.
Oh, yeah.
And,
it's tough for everyone.
Here's the truth is it's tough for everyone.
Yes, absolutely.
Like, what's interesting is like just the perspective that you and I have, because we've had a lot of the same life experiences. We're open to a lot of things, but there are probably other things that we would struggle with together to not understand that makes sense to other people.
Right.
And so everybody has us. But what would you say to encourage people if they want to become more open and not fear that?
Well, I think the first part of it about the not fearing is to say that no one is going to infect you.
It is not
you don't have to. No one's going to force you to change your mind.
You're not going to have to change your beliefs to be a friend with someone.
So it's, understanding someone's perspective is not adopting their perspective. Understanding someone's faith is not adopting their faith. Understanding another denomination.
That's your pull quote. Yeah. Understanding is not adopting.
Right.
That's so good.
So start with that. And then I think that the other part of it is just what you're asking for is to say, okay, well, just because this is not my truth or my context doesn't nullify it for somebody else. I may not have a trans child, but that doesn't mean there aren't trans kids.
Yeah.
I might not have a gay family member. That doesn't mean people aren't gay and that they don't deserve civil rights and that that's not a reality for people, in that way. I might not be from India. That doesn't nullify their traditions, their culture, those people, all those kinds of things. So who are the people that you fear the most? Who are the people that you have the most animosity towards?
That's an interesting question, yeah.
Is there some level of respect?
Yeah.
Is there some level of insight or understanding that you can adopt there that will help in that process?
Yeah. So we talk about the why question a lot. Why is that particular group fearful? Why do you want to distance yourself?
Exactly right.
You can look at why do I want to distance myself? I will say as I get, we're getting older. We all are. I can find myself. Actually, I love older people. I always have. But people that are maybe just a bit older than me, and I see certain behaviors, and I think, God, they're seeming so old right now. Or that's it. But why is it that I would pass that judgment? Because I fear becoming that. Because I'm close to that. That's it. So I think it's looking.
And what is our expression of fear? It's almost always anger.
Yeah.
The true expression of fear is anger.
Yeah.
And so I have learned about myself that in general, the time when I am the most angry, the time when I'm most furious is generally the time when I'm the most likely to be wrong. So if you and I have a scenario, even together as a married couple, something happens.
You mean if we were to have words?
If we were, if there was some moment where we didn't get along, which has never happened, but if there was some moment where there was an issue, I have found that in general, it stews in your brain and you replay it. And then you have the fantasy conversation where you say everything you wanted to say and they say, oh, you know what, you're right. And they bow to your superior intellect and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
The angrier I am is in general, that is the flag that says you're most likely wrong here.
Yeah.
And so that question of saying, who is it that makes us the most angry?
Yeah.
What people group brings out the worst in me? What people group makes me the most angry?
Yeah.
Is it possible that I have a fear that's there that may not even really be founded?
Yeah.
Is it possible I am reducing these people to a two-dimensional caricature that doesn't allow them to be human?
Yeah.
Is it possible that they're quite possibly even right about something? One of the things that you and I talk about a lot with Dreamers is the value of being wrong. And it's the most exhilarating thing to figure out. I was wrong. I was wrong about that. And then that becomes a whole open door to growth and to new discoveries and everything. We joke about, for centuries we were wrong about the earth being flat. And then in the moment we discovered or agreed that the world was round, it opened up an entire universe to us.
Yeah.
Science shot up our understanding and our insight, and everything just exploded in that one determination that we were wrong about this, and it's actually that. So being wrong, discovering that is the beginning of a whole new world for us.
And being able to do that. I was thinking about that quote that we heard Bono which is if we had a guru, it would probably be Bono. Well, we've got a few, but he said, we tend to want to have the conversations with the people that think like we do.
Yes.
He says, but the ones that we need to be having, the more important ones are with those who don't think like we do.
Yes.
And so I would encourage people to not be afraid to just have conversations and chat with people that are a little different than you. What's your holiday like? Say you've got Easter weekend coming up. Okay, well, do you guys do anything to celebrate Easter? What's that like? Or no, we don't do that, but we celebrate this.
Right.
So to be able to be open and have some of those conversations that aren't as easy.
Yes.
I would encourage people to try to be open to doing that. That can be enlightening.
Right.
Another thing that I always try to encourage people to do, and a lot of this is based on time and resources, and I get that, but anytime you can go somewhere, and sometimes it may just be art that you're able, or books, or read, but that you can learn about other people's lifestyles, cultures, experiences, will open your mind and heart. Yeah. If you can travel, do it. Go see what it's like.
There's a security in knowing kind of who you are, and we talk about this a lot, that, someone else's view of marriage or a union or whatever cannot and will not, if they come back tomorrow and they say, okay, there's no more marriage. There's no more weddings. We're not going to take this thing and do these unions anymore. We're not going to do that anymore. That could not and would not take away from what you and I have. You and I have a marriage. You and I have a commitment. Yeah. So somebody else getting married and somebody else getting divorced does not impact or change what you and I have together.
Yeah.
And so your beliefs are intact. Your spirituality is intact. Your views are intact. And so you don't have to feel threatened in that way.
Yeah, it's interesting.
And if something does change, well, it was likely for the reason. Yeah. It was likely for a reason that it changed.
Yeah. Do you remember when the first time that we got to go to Chicago and live there for several months when we were working? Mm-hmm. And we I
think that was your other husband.
No, okay, I'll call him then. Yeah. But no, that was an interesting eye-opener. Of course, it was a lifestyle that we longed to look into. Right. We live in a small city, but we're from Oklahoma. Right. And so a lot of the culture around us is similar.
Yeah.
To what we were familiar with. So all of a sudden you move to a city that has 3 million people.
Yeah.
So the population of our state is 3.2 million, and the population of Chicagoland, which is Chicago and its suburban areas, is 3 million people. Mm-hmm. That is one city in one state. That'll blow your mind. But even the idea, when we live in our areas, a lot of us are fortunate to have our own homes, and we have our own little pieces of small land. I mean, I'm not talking about out in the country, but just small lots that we live in, and so we enjoy those, and we have people over to our homes a lot, and that's different. Well, if you're living in a big city, you have a tiny apartment, and you enjoy your space, but you're out amongst other people a lot because you go down and share the same coffee shops, and you go to the neighborhood pubs, and you go out and experience things. So even the difference in that lifestyle and understanding, people don't have people over as much because they don't have as much space. I mean, that's just a tiny example. Right. But you could say, why aren't these people as friendly? When the truth was they were out with people a lot more often. It's interesting.
We had so many discoveries like that while we were there, and we met so many people from different phases in their life and struggles in their life and phases in their work life and different social groups and all that stuff. And it was such a wonderfully, just a wonderful eye-opening moment to see that and to see other people. Mm-hmm. And it absolutely expanded our world. Yeah. Absolutely. It's going from, only 4 or 5 paints on your palette to now there's 50 paints in your palette.
Yeah.
There's all these different things you can do and see and say now. And that none of that diminishes us living in a small town, because we choose to live here.
Oh yeah, we
love this place. And so it's not about saying, that's so much better.
One is not better than the other. We just didn't understand that lifestyle.
Yeah, so celebrating Chicago doesn't diminish from Bartlesville. Absolutely. It's just not the same. So anyway, this whole thing about just because it's not your context doesn't mean it's not someone's context, and it doesn't nullify that for somebody else. Just because it's not your world, your marriage, your childhood, your country, your denomination or religion, doesn't mean the other is void or null and void.
Right.
And
meet your neighbor.
Yeah.
Introduce yourself to your coworkers.
Don't be afraid.
Yeah.
If you have to be afraid, then probably what you have isn't worth holding on to.
Yeah.
As your professor from OU would say.
Yeah. It's right. I can't help but think about Mr. Rogers. We talk about, speaking of gurus.
Yeah.
But this idea of understanding, he spent his whole 30 years on television trying to help people understand that other types of people weren't scary.
Yes.
And he did it, from the perspective of a young child. But I mean, I remember when Evangeline was young, we were like, we're going to teach her Mr. Rogers, and you can find it online. And we did.
Black opera singers and Hispanic bakers and
the idea that you would know the people in your neighborhood. Yes. I mean, we might laugh that off, but my gosh. Yeah. I mean, we're living in a time with all this cultural divide and isolation. A lot more Mr. Rogers could come in handy, So I think it's just braving up, man.
Yeah.
Get to know people. Your truth is your truth, and theirs can be theirs.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's not necessarily adopting something.
Right.
It's understanding it.
Yeah, truth can expand because discoveries happen. You discover stuff that expands your truth.
Yeah.
We're not living in the same levels of truth that we were from 4,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago or 1,000 years ago because we have discovered more things.
Yeah.
And that's a brilliant place to be.
I love it.
Yep. Humans, thank you for being a part of this today. Thanks for being a part of the conversation. I hope that you will go out and continue this conversation with somebody else and that you'll continue the conversation with us by messaging us and weighing in on things and maybe even meeting us on June 19th when we have our Dreamers Lab event.
Yes, we would love that. We'd love it. Invite a friend out to coffee. Make a list of what you're afraid of.
Yeah. That's a great thing to do.
I love it because
what am I afraid of?
I love it because as we were talking,
makes me the most
I'm
angry?
not going to say mine out loud, but I have a few.
Right.
That and when you identify that,
what a great use of space.
Exactly. You can realize why you're not being open to people. So,
yeah.
All right. Coffee it
up.
up.
All right, humans. Thanks for being a part of this. We will see you soon.
See ya.
Peace out.
Thanks for listening. Please like, subscribe, and share this episode. And remember, continue this conversation with someone you know. This is Pioneer Dream.